So this program is the history and future of guitar noise, and Adrian is really the perfect person.
You note he used the term noise, guitar noise. I like that.
When we were putting together the festival this year, we thought, the electric guitar is really one of the major transformational sort of technologies of the last 50 years. It's affected the lives of billions of people. It is the most ubiquitous instrument. It's probably one of the most expressive instruments that's ever been created. And specifically, you are an extractor of that expressiveness from the instruments. Like a dentist. So let's talk a little bit about Leo Fender, who I don't know if you folks know, invented at least one strain of the electric guitar as we know it, the Telecaster and the Stratocaster in the mid-'50s. That's the guitar that Adrian has always played.
Started on,
yeah.
Well, Leo Fender was the guy who kindly figured out, he was maybe kind of the Henry Ford of electric guitar. He figured out how to make a guitar that was practical, affordable, easy to work on. It wasn't all that, it wasn't handcrafted or anything like the Gibson guitars of that era, but it was a very easy guitar for people to take to, and you could get a lot of sounds out of it. It was a basic guitar. It had just a neck. It had, a couple of pickups, a couple of knobs for the volume and the tone, and a hole where you plug it in. And then the second guitar that he brought out, which was the Stratocaster, which many guitar players have used, had 3 pickups, and then they added this little device called the tremolo arm, which is what I have so much fun with. With the tremolo arm, you can lower or raise the sound. And it becomes very expressive if you've got it kind of a certain way. Your body kind of gets used to moving it up and down different ways to get microtonal notes or to just get more expression. I totally agree with what you say. This is the most self-expressive instrument I know of. That's why I like it so much. I really started as a drummer, but I had so many song ideas in my head, and then eventually I realized, well, I'm going to have to teach myself to play an instrument that you can play songs on. What happened after that was, Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, those big giant guitarists of the 60s arrived. And I thought, hey, maybe I could try some of that too. And when I first started, since this is about technology, I think one thing I should point out is my career has actually paralleled the advent of all the music technology, almost to a T, really. When I started, if you were lucky, you had an amplifier and a guitar. And that's pretty much all there was to have. And maybe the amplifier had some reverb or something in it. But other than that, there was nothing else until, the 60s bands came in and they started designing pedals for them. And so then you had the advent of Jimi Hendrix, who was the first guy to really come out and have some pedals on stage and start making sounds with the guitar, not just playing notes and chords, but he would make sounds with the guitars. And from that point forward, the technology just grew and grew and grew to the point where now I'm actually playing through a laptop computer today. So it's really changed a lot in those years.
What's the, since you mentioned that, what's the stuff that's sitting underneath the laptop in your rack there, just so everybody knows what the quick tour?
The main thing I have in this top rack here is what most of my guitar sounds are generated by. It's called the Axe Effects. It's by Fractal Audio. It makes about 85% of the sounds that I'm making. Well, what I also wanted to do is have a secondary sound capability, like a second guitarist, in fact. And the thing below it is a virtual guitar setup that Roland makes. It gives me a second guitar player. So, for example, I have...
Yeah, go ahead.
If I have this guitar sound as my normal guitar sound, and I wanted to put another guitar sound, maybe I want to put one that makes it sound like chorusing or doubling, I would add in the VG99, which is on this volume pedal. So here it is with it, and then without it, and then with it. For example, that's just one of the things. I have a lot of programs in there, so they can be designed to do any number of things. In fact, one of my favorite ones is the ones I have where The VG99 virtual guitar is actually completely different tuning. And that way you really have, it sounds like two completely different guitar players playing at once. Below that, there's just kind of stuff that makes all that stuff work.
No, that's okay. We don't have to go with
Yeah,
it.
there's
Totally
MIDI
geeked
things
out.
and, you know, things that make convert the signal. This is a MIDI guitar, which I'll talk about later when we get to, we're going to talk about this guitar in particular. But I started with Strats and Mustangs and Fender guitars, and they're nice, they're inexpensive, they're easy to fix, and for many years I loved them, but they do have inherent problems, and one day I finally found this guitar, which seemingly has no problems.
One thing about the Strat that we wanted to point out in the sort of area of unintended consequences is the position of that top volume knob. The master volume knob on the Strat allows players like you and Jeff Beck to do things that are expressive, vocal qualities that are signature to how you're playing.
What you generally do, and this is true with a lot of guitars, but it started with Strats. And Fender, he put the volume knob right here, and so you could just kind of wrap your pinky around it, and you could, sounds good, doesn't it? And so you could use it as a volume control to bring the level of the note in. And that was crucial for me, because you get to a point where you start having these things, they're the physiology of what you do. You do it automatically. You automatically grab this tremolo, and you automatically wrap your little finger around the volume knob. So I'm very glad that this, which is a Parker Fly guitar, has the same tendency. The volume knob is right where I want it to be.
Let's talk a little bit about Jimi Hendrix, because I
Okay.
think that's an inflection point in the history of a lot of things, but certainly in guitar noise and expressiveness of guitar, making the guitar make noises it wasn't perhaps intended to.
When I started playing guitar, he wasn't even started yet. I started in 1966, and Jimi Hendrix came around in 1967. And that was kind of a life-changing thing. I was still playing drums, and I went to see Jimi Hendrix perform, the only time I got to see him play, and that was a shock, like, oh my gosh, you can do that with a guitar? But, you know, he was doing all kinds of fun things, like playing it behind his back and playing it with his teeth, which is how I got this one chip right here a few years later. And, you know, that really, I think, inspired just about everybody. Even the other great guitar players of that day were pretty taken by all the things that Jimmy started doing. And really, when you look at it, he only had a couple of pedals on the floor. He still didn't have nearly what we have now as a matter of common fact. You know, everybody has a pedal board now, but back then he had a wah-wah and a fuzz tone, and he could do a lot of things with just those two little devices. And that was the start of it all, really, for me.
Do you want to give us? Can you give us a little bit of a quick tour of the Hendrix vocabulary? Ah, look at that.
No, I'm not going to do that.
No.
Because I really don't have to. It's all in this little pedal right here. This is the Jimi Hendrix pedal.
Oh, we.
This is made by a good company that I recommend called Digitech. And they actually went back to the master tapes of his original recordings with the original engineer, Eddie Kramer, and they listened and they mimicked all of those sounds. So rather than showing you that I can do some of them, because I don't really have that many of them here, because I don't try to sound like Jimi Hendrix anymore, right. I would just recommend you go get this pedal. I don't even, you know, I don't sell them or anything. I'm not trying to make any money, but I used to use this pedal before I got this new setup. The newer setup that I have now is primarily so I can move around the world without having to drag a bunch of amplifiers and racks of gear, which is just intolerable. You can't do that. But if you did want to sound like Jimmy, you just plug your guitar in here, and it'll tell you each song that is his. You use a little knob for each song. It's very nice.
That sort of takes the fun out of it, doesn't it? In a way, you think?
It does, I suppose, yeah. But you really shouldn't be trying to sound like Jimi Hendrix by now anyway. That's been done.
So what particular aspects of his playing spoke to you back then?
He did do some things that weren't even effect-laden things that I really enjoyed with chords and things. He would do kind of... And those were kind of, a style of playing that I'd never actually heard before. It came from a guy named Curtis Mayfield, as it turns out. I learned these things later. And he would put that in his songs, So I liked his chordal stuff, which was what separated him from the other guitar players, I think, was that he was an actual songwriter-singer. So he had two modes of self-expression, whereas pretty much the other guys mostly just played guitar. I don't mean just played guitar, but that's all they did.
Do you see the electric guitar as an instrument that is mimicking the human vocal quality, or?
Yeah, that's exactly what I think some people try to do. I mean, everyone has their own approach to the instrument. That's why it's so personalized, and that's why it's such a great self-expressive instrument. Some guys just like to play really fast and shred and things, and that's great if you want to sit in your bedroom 16 hours a day. But I like the guys who I like the guys who make it sound like a voice, somewhat. Jeff Beck would be the best proponent of that for me personally, and he's actually a friend of mine, so I like what he does is somewhat like what I do, in that we use a lot of the tremolo to shape the sound. So it's not just a note, it's 16 notes if you want.
Well, I wanted to also point out some of the effects that you get and some of the stuff that you do on the guitar are physical things that you're doing to it. The neck bending, the stuff behind the nut.
Well, one of the things about Stratocasters when I first started using them is if you use the tremolo as abusively as I wanted to, the guitar pretty much remains out of tune. And if you look at all the films of Jimi Hendrix had tons of problems with that too. I mean, he's always kind of tuning while he's playing. So I got tired of doing that, so one day I just went, Now it's still in tune, and the neck didn't break off, so I'm happy now. So I did that really as a way because I had so much trouble with the tuning of the guitars, especially when we first started King Crimson, and there was very little time in the 80s, for me to tune up between songs. We wanted our shows to go boom, 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 And so there's me trying to tune while I'm singing frame by frame, and, it's too much stuff, so I started bending the neck instead. Now I don't have to do that, but there are a lot of physical things you do. I just showed you the one with your pinky that you do, and just the way that you use the tremolo, and there's just so many things. There's harmonics, for example. And you can do those different ways, too. And that's just, that's a physical thing. There's no pedal for that, or it doesn't take anything. You can do it on an acoustic guitar.
Do you want to give us a little bit more?
Something?
Yeah, give us a little bit of something sort of in the middle.
Okay.
That...
Okay, let's see. Well, let me just move into this area, which is what kind of helped me out a lot was that when I came into the world of guitar, by the time I got somewhere with it and had the mechanics under control and could play well enough, there were already so many great guitar players out there. It was very, very difficult to find something that you could do that they didn't do. Pretty much all the real estate was taken up, So I found it, I found myself playing stock sort of licks and things from other guitar players that I'd learned from. And I just decided at one point, I'll try to substitute those for other things. And the first thing I did one night, I was playing in a club band, and I was taking a solo, and all of a sudden I went like a car horn going by. And people laughed and thought, that was great. Oh, look, he can make a car horn on his guitar. So I thought, well, that's something nobody seems to care about doing, and I'll try that for a while. The next thing I decided to do, I saw a guy on television. You may remember this guy, you may not, only if you're as old as I am. His name is Maury Amsterdam. Maury Amsterdam, right?
The Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah, from the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Rosemary, yeah.
Well, people don't know this, but he was a cellist. And he went on the Johnny Carson show one night, and he was sitting there, and being a comedian, instead of actually playing the cello, he did what I was trying to do on guitar. He started making funny noises with it. And one of them he made by using the bow and using harmonics. He made it sound like a seagull a little bit. So I went right straight home and tried to do my seagull imitation, which, you know, we've put in a few songs by now, and I think I've released the seagulls. I don't need them anymore now. But for a while, I was going through this whole animal stage as a way to, as I'm saying, to kind of ingratiate myself into one little piece of real estate that no one else was doing. So, and I get plenty of calls from people, can you do this, can you do that? And, you know, what I found out in the end was, of course, you don't want it to be a gimmick. So you have to give those animals a place to live, a reason to exist. So one day I was fooling around and got something that I thought sounded like a rhinoceros, and I wrote a song called Lone Rhinoceros, you know, because I needed a place for the rhinoceros to live. So it wouldn't be just a gimmick. Turns out they don't make that sound at all. This is what I thought they sounded like. Turns out they sound like, they almost sound like a whale instead. I was really disappointed when I finally got to hear a rhinoceros. Then, of course, the next one came along was the elephant, which one day in our practice sessions where we were trying to write what became the discipline record for King Crimson, we were playing, you know, a little lick that I had made up, and then I just started fooling around and putting this elephant sound that I just found. Now, I can't do it the way I used to do it, I'll just tell you that, but this is close. What you do basically is you get it so there's a little bit of a waver to it, because when elephants trumpet, there's kind of a waver there. So I did that. Originally, I did that with a flanger that I turned it really slow, so the waveform was very, very slow. And then I just one day could do it all of a sudden. Seemed like there was this elephant coming out, and so the guys in the band said, "Well, now you've got an elephant. What are you going to do with that?" And I wrote Elephant Talk. So there you go. You got to give them a place to live. I guess maybe my favorite one, though, that I like, and I still do a lot, is whales. You know, the sound of a humpback whale. Now, the first time I wrote a piece of music to put the humpback whale in, I called it Ballet for a Blue Whale, because I didn't realize that blue whales don't make that sound. Only humpbacks do. So now that I know a lot more about whales, I'll confide in you that it's actually a blue whale. I mean, a humpback. That might be a dolphin right there, I'm not sure, but... So there's the sort of the way that I got my foot in the door by making funny sounds. And that, you know, I elaborated on that. I seem to have a pretty good ear for figuring out what the components of a sound might be, and then I started making orchestral instrument sounds and you know, machine sounds, and anything I could think of, I would try to figure out some way to mimic it, or more importantly, find something that had never been done. And
but the musicality of the sounds is really quite striking.
well, you have to
I
have
think.
the musicality part of it, or it's like I say, or it just becomes a gimmick, and people go, "Well, that's that guy that just thinks he's a, you know, Marvin Perkins or whatever his name was."
Yeah, Marlon. Yeah.
Cream magazine called me the Marlon Perkins of electric guitar. I thought that was great. One of my favorites.
But I mean, now that the technology has moved on to a point, the ability to do that kind of mimicry is really less challenging and interesting, right? Because you could sample anything and...
Yeah, that's the thing. Right now, I mean, it's the technology has gone to so many new levels from back in... I'm talking about in 1980, 81, 82, something, when there was just the inkling of these first few things. But now you can sample things, and it does take the fun out of it. I mean, for example, because this is a MIDI guitar, and because I'm running through a computer, I can actually sample just about anything. I'll show you here, just a second. So there's a piano for you, and I didn't have to work at that at all. I just put the guitar through the computer and dial up a piano. It does take a lot of the fun out of it, though. I still like to do interesting things like make the guitar do something it's not supposed to do, or find a new wrinkle that no one else has done as far as I know. If you just give me a minute, I wasn't going to play this piece because it's too long. It's a 14-minute piece, but I'll show you something that's new. That will be on my next record, the whole piece, and I'll explain what's new about it and why I can do it now and couldn't do it 6 months ago before I started using the computer. Let me find it, though. There's a lot of tap dancing up here when you we do this stuff. Yep. Okay. This is called Variations of Wave Pressure, and what I was trying to do, as I got this new rig setup, what I realized eventually was, well, now I can kind of sound like more than one guitar player. And because I work in a trio format so often, that's very important. Then I realized, well, if I treat this the right way, I could also sound like a guitar player that has some bass playing as well. So I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Some of this song is that way. For example, now what I did was I realized that usually you use something called a delay, and what you do with the delay is you strike a note or a chord, and it plays that same note again, exactly that same way, 2 or 3 times, how many ever times you set it to be, but it's always the same note or the same chord. That's what a delay does. I realized, though, with this, I could actually pitch the delay to a different note. And I could even do that more than once. So, for example, when I hit one note now, it says this. See, it's 3 notes now. And if I put this pedal in over here, it becomes a bass note. Now, that's the kind of thing that I like to find with technology and then do something with it, because no one else has ever done it. So it's kind of interesting to sit around in your studio and sound like 3 guys. You can have arguments with each other about who gets to turn up loudest.
Now, you've also done stuff in that piece as well that's using compound rhythms superimposed on each other, which is something that started in King Crimson, right?
Sure. With Crimson, we did a lot of dual guitar playing, where one player would play a phrase and the other player would play that phrase but change it at some point. I can demonstrate it to you pretty simply, I think, here. This would be the song called Frame by Frame, which works on the principle of a figure that's in 7. I play the figure 2 times in a row. That would be 1 time of the figure. So that's the figure, and I would be playing it over and over. Robert, however, would play that figure with me. Robert Fripp, the other guitarist in King Crimson, would play the figure with me for a while, and then he would drop off the last note. So he would play. Eventually, if you do that long enough, mathematics will prove out that he will come back and join me, and it'll make, we'll be back exactly in sync together. I'll demonstrate it for you by making a little loop here of what I play, and then I'll add what Robert plays, and you'll see that it comes back around. I don't want it to be too loud, so... There's me. Now I change. There you go. For a while in King Crimson, that seemed to be the only thing that Robert Fripp wanted to do. And so I was given the task of writing songs with that technique. And, eventually I kind of couldn't think of anything more to write, but we wrote, frame by frame and a lot of things like that. And for a period of time, the first 3 years of King Crimson, that was kind of the backbone of a lot of the music. And I like it.
Do you want to talk a little bit about, we're gonna do a little bit of Q&A in a bit, and then Adrian's gonna play another piece.
Yeah, and other things. I wanted to talk about this guitar a little bit for you. But why don't we have if you don't mind, Stuart, could we maybe have questions and answers now, a little bit at least? The idea is you walk up to a microphone and embarrass yourself like I'm doing up here.
Yes. We've got mics on either side, so folks can just come right down the aisle and talk into the mic.
Don't be shy. Come on down. We're giving away this free Hendrix pedal.
Right.
I want to know if you've gotten connected with the classical music world and with composers in the classical world, or new musicians, if you want to call them that.
Well, I don't read music. I write it, but I write it kind of in my head. So it's very difficult to belong to that realm of music. However, about 3 or 4 years ago, I decided, I wanted to write a piece of music that would be a very substantial piece for my power trio to play. I wanted to show off what we could do. And that piece became something called E, which is a 43-minute piece of music. I also decided, as I was writing it, to try to think of it as a classical piece of music and therefore write it that way. And when we made our record of it as a power trio called E, I said in the press and in my website that it was really also supposed to be an orchestral piece. And I thought, of course, nothing would ever come of that. You know how hard it is to get an orchestral piece played in this world today? It's incredibly difficult. Frank Zappa couldn't do it, and I didn't think that I would either. But then one day, I got a call from the Metropole Orchestra in Amsterdam, and they said, we do want to do your piece, and by the way, we're funded by the government, and we can do it. So a year and a half later, after a lot of different things, I finally went to Amsterdam for a month, and we did a performance of E. I called it E for orchestra to delineate between the power trio version of it. And by the way, it's for sale here today. That's the latest record we just put out. And it was astounding, actually, to work in that world. I couldn't believe it. Ever since I was a little kid, I always liked orchestral music, because when I was 8 years old, I was taken to the music hall in Cincinnati, and I saw a symphony orchestra, and it really made a huge impression on me, even more than Maury Amsterdam. And ever since then, I've kind of always loved classical music and pop music and that other noise, avant-garde stuff in between the two. So to finally get to do that was a great, great pleasure for me. You were next.
Hi. I'm wondering, as you have as you and the body of electric guitarists have developed these new sounds, have you had to develop new vocabulary, written or verbal vocabulary, in order to describe or explain or even remember what you're doing?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yes, absolutely, yes. You do develop little things, like here's my purple sound, and, you know, this is Squirtle. I'll do Squirtle now, and I'll do Squawk now, and you have these sounds. But when you're playing together as musicians, you always relate to music that way. If you're not trained musicians looking at pieces of paper, what you have to do is you develop that vocabulary. You kind of know between yourselves, when he says that, he means he's going to do this. And
What about when a reviewer is telling about it, or how would you tell it to me, not being in the room?
well, I would probably tell it to you differently than a reviewer would, because I would say how fantastic it is, and the reviewer might not say that. But there is a lot of new word associations. I relate it to the computer world. 10 years ago, Facebook, what was that? You didn't know what that was. You didn't know what all these words that we have now, no one knew anything. There was no internet. And it's the same in music. There always are new terms. I remember when one of the first new terms was flanging back in the 60s. What's flanging? It's when you hold your thumb on the side of the reels on the tape machine, and it sort of makes the stuff go. And that became a pedal that everybody used, and flanging was used ever since. It's a new term. There are lots of new terms like that, yeah. I can't think of more, but that's just because I'm silly. Go ahead. Oh, you were next, sorry.
First, I wanted to say thanks for being an inspiration to a lot of us guitar players, and I first heard you at the Exit in Chicago way back with the Bears. But my question is, why do you think guitar modeling hasn't taken off more than it has? Seems to have been out there for a while, and now it's kind of regressing. And also the second part of the question is, have you had a lot of experience with modeled guitars?
Modeling guitar, for those of you who don't know, is a technique that they started doing with gear, I don't know, maybe about 8 years ago or so, where an amplifier would have a section built into it where it could sound like other amplifiers. And eventually they started doing the same with putting effects in it and doing other things, so that you wouldn't have to have so many pieces of gear. You could theoretically get a Fender amp and a Marshall amp and a Vox amp sound out of this one amp. And it works really quite well sometimes. I like it. I use it somewhat, but I'm still a little old school in that I like to really develop the sound myself. But there are some modeling things that I think are very much worth having, and almost any guitarist these days probably has at least one pedal that does some kind of modeling, whether they know it or not. I don't necessarily think that they're regressing. I think it's a standard now. I don't know that they're going to take it any further or not, but the newest and nicest thing that I liked about modeling came out a few years ago, and we put it in my guitar here, and that is this little device called a Variax. The Variax models the sound of different guitars, different types of guitars. In fact, 25 different guitars. And not just guitars, but with this little button, if I press this down, I can leaf through these settings and find, a banjo, an acoustic guitar, a Gibson guitar, a Rickenbacker 12-string, a sitar. I'll show you, for example. Here's a choral sitar, the little electric sitar that people use. Now, if I pull it back up, I'm back to regular guitar. Here's a 12-string, I think. No, that's not a 12-string. That's a Rickenbacker. Just a different type of guitar. Here's a 12-string. And so on. So with this one little knob right here, I can sound like 25 different vintage instruments that you'd have to have a semi-trailer to carry around to the shows, and then 10 guys to tune it for you. So that's, to me, it's quite a nice technology. I love it. It's really nice. Those are the kind of things that are starting to happen now. Also, as I pointed out, now you're starting to get people who can actually play guitar sounds from their computer. They don't even need the amps anymore. So the technology keeps growing and growing. You can't even keep up with it anymore like I used to be able to.
What do you do? I mean, if you can't, I mean, you at a certain point, you just get off the train and just use
Well,
the
what I do is I kind of read reviews and listen to what people are saying about certain things, and you kind of know, oh, this thing is worth checking out. And then you check out something, and what you do is you learn it as best you can and try to get it to do things it doesn't even isn't even supposed to do. And then you move on to the next thing, because eventually it'll be outdated, you know, just like a computer itself. They outdate themselves every 18 months because they get the speed faster again. But, you know, mostly what I like to do is just get, you know, maybe there's a new box that's going to do some delays or something. So I'll get that box, but there'll be 6 different ones that do it. I just go and check them out and find the one that I prefer. For example, for looping, I had to go through, the looping I do is done with the computer. And we went through a lot of different loopers that you can use in a computer to get the looper that does exactly what I like it to do, that has the features that I like. It's just like buying an appliance. Go ahead.
This is super simple, but I don't play electric. You were playing those harmonics earlier, and you know, when you tap on a acoustic, on a harmonic, you'll get the open string and the harmonic at the same time. But you were playing on those bass notes with your right hand and getting the open string and the harmonics. I'm wondering if there's a surefire way to always get that open string and the harmonic when you're hitting it with your right hand.
Are you talking about this, for example?
Yeah, that is,
Yes.
Is that what you're getting, the open and the?
Well, what that is, actually, I'm moving the harmonics along the string. You see, all along the string, there's a different range of harmonics. Sounds a little like a juice harp or something, but
Yeah, it sounds like there's 2 notes.
yeah, it is
And that's
kind
the
of 2
open
notes,
string and the
yes.
harmonic.
And the way I do it, I hold the pick in my middle finger and thumb position, and then you use your end of your index finger to actually do the tap on the string. There are many other ways. For example, if I want to get an exact note of some sort, let's say that I want to play this A note. I play the harmonic a whole octave above where the note that I'm holding. So you can...
Now, can you adjust it and bring up the open string sound more like you were getting on those lower strings?
No, not with that particular technique, no.
But you were getting
That's
on
one
the-
where you're just getting the pure harmonic. And this is one where you're just getting the pure harmonic, where you're just hitting a harmonic on the
But
neck.
So what are you doing different on those low strings where you are getting more of a double sound?
Yeah, I think maybe that just comes with low strings. I don't know. I haven't read the manual on harmonics yet.
Okay.
I hope I answered that. I'm not sure.
Go ahead.
Congratulations on your work with the Metropole Orchestra. I tuned into all that stuff via the broadband, and the DVD was exceptional.
Thank you.
It was really enjoyable. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit what we could expect next from Studio Belew. And also, I'm curious about this, the red pedal that you keep tapping on very furiously with your right foot. Looks like you're going to break it. If you could
Yeah.
tell me what's going on with that, if it's broken.
I hate to tell you what that pedal does because it's my secret, but I'll tell you. First of all, what am I going to be doing next? Well, if you know anything, if you've been to my blog or anything, we've done a lot of touring, and we did a band camp with Tony Levin and Pat Mastelotto from King Crimson, and then we went on tour with their trio and my trio, and then we played, both trios at the end would play a set of King Crimson material. We just got back from that. That was 6 weeks long, all around the United States and up into Canada. And it was very, very well received, and we really had a great time. Hopefully, we'll do some more of that at some point in the future, but it takes a lot of work to put a 6-week tour together up front before you ever get to go to the shows. What I said I would do is, as soon as this is my last personal appearance that's booked for this year, because just before we started the tour, my mind exploded and I started writing songs like they were going out of style. After I came back from the experience of doing the orchestral piece, which was so intense, and I practiced it for 3 months, I actually thought, no, what am I going to do? You know, I hadn't written a song for a long time by then. And I tuned my acoustic guitar a little differently. I tuned the E string down to a D, and I tuned the G string down to an E. And all of a sudden, I started finding all these new chord shapes and things that I couldn't have played in any other way. You know, it's a great way of breaking your habits. And suddenly, songs started pouring out. So just before we went on the tour, myself and my engineer, Daniel Rowland, who comes to my studio and works with me every day, we just plowed into a bunch of new songs. I've recorded 9 new songs already. I have at least that many more to record. 3 of them we were able to finish. Most of them are in various states of being finished. So when I go back home tomorrow, I'm jumping back into the next solo record, and I can't wait to do it. I'm really excited about it. And I actually wrote a song for Pixar. I mean, I don't think they're going to care, but, you know, I wrote it for them. And I sent it to them, and they said they really like it, so that's nice. But, you know, but, I mean, I just thought, with that new tuning, that's the first thing I did is wrote a Pixar song. It was fun. Now, you were asking about the red pedal?
Yeah.
That's going to cost you some money. Now, the red pedal is an easy thing to explain. This is called a Harmony Man. It's also by Digitech, the same people who can mimic Jimi Hendrix so well. And what it does, you can set 4 different intervals with this. I'll show you. This is one interval. That's an octave below. This is one. That's a 5th below. This is one. A 3rd above. And the 4th one I use is a 5th above. Now, the reason I selected those particular intervals is because they work with just about anything that you're playing. And what I do with the pedal is I slide in extra notes while I'm playing by just tapping on this pedal over here. See, I'm really not a very good guitar player, and I'm not fast, that's for sure. But I figured out ways to seem fast with my foot. See, I don't just play with my hands like all the other guitar players. I use my feet. Here, let me find a sound that I can demonstrate that on. Something good. Let's see here. Yeah, that'll do it. See that? I was playing one note. How about that, huh? Now you know my secret. I hope you still like me. I did get my money's worth because it was free. And I actually went to them and asked them if they could do this. They were designing. They had another pedal called the Whammy Pedal that you might know about. And that one, you could only do one note that way, and you had to tune it with the actual pedal. And I said, no, that's ridiculous. You can't do that because it's so easy to hit the pedal accidentally, and then you're not out in tune and so forth. So I asked them, is there any way we could do this idea? And they did. They didn't call it anything. I think they need to call it the Belew box, but we'll get to that at some point. But I really love that. It's a great way to do something when you're soloing that you wouldn't be able to do. It's physically impossible to play what I just played. I don't care if you're, Stevie Ray Vaughan, you're not going to get that what I just played there with 2 hands. Okay, so next question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, sir. I was going to sort of take things way back to the time you spent cutting your teeth in your sort of very short-lived but brilliant work with Frank Zappa. And I wondered a couple of things. First of all, one, what you learned from that experience. And second of all, what Frank might have learned, because it always seems to me that that you sort of may have influenced the direction that Frank later took in some of his later playing and soloing. I don't know.
I don't know about the second half. I never actually talked with Frank about that. I would be honored if that were true, but I don't actually know. The first half, working with Frank, I learned so much. I was with Frank for 1 year, but in that year, it was kind of the only real education I was ever given. And he showed me a lot of amazing things musically. The most important thing was he was the first person who taught me how to play in odd time signatures. He gave me just the basic little exercises. Here's how you play a 7. and something like that. Let me show you. For example, got to get back a regular sound here. And he just took a D chord and he said, here's how you play a 7. Which I quickly realized, well, all you're doing is accenting. You're accenting 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3, and from that, then you can figure out that 1 2 1 2 3 is a 5, and so forth is an 11, and so on. So that was probably the most important musical thing he taught me. But he taught me a lot of stuff that was non-musical that I got so much stuff out of.
Can you share any of those things?
I could share some of it, yeah. No, really seriously, he taught me how to earn a living and be a professional musician, how to be a recording artist, how to master a record, how to go on tour around the world, the daily sort of nuts and bolts things that you don't get in any book that I know of. They're the things that you learn as you're going. And Frank was so generous with me. He just took me aside at every little chance he got and told me a story about this or something about that, and then I observed as much as I possibly could as well. I lived at his house for 3 months while we rehearsed, not full-time, but on the weekends, and that was because I didn't read music. Everyone else in the band read music, so the idea was on Monday morning when practice would start, they'd get, sheet music, but I wouldn't. What I would do is I'd go home the previous weekend with him, and he would start showing me what's coming up the next week. So I got to actually live with the Zappa family for 3 months while we did all of our rehearsals before we ever stepped on a stage. Do you want to hear my favorite living with the Zappa story? Sure. You don't mind? Well, the first weekend I went to the Zappa's place with Frank after our rehearsals. Frank and I were sitting up in the living room on his purple couch, and his son Dweezil was 5 years old. And Dweezil had these beautiful long spit curls hairs, gorgeous looking hair like I dream about every night. And he came riding in the room on a red tricycle, and he was just kind of riding around in front of us. And I said, boy, Frank, that's a beautiful little girl you have there. And he pulled his tricycle up in front of me and said, fuck you! And that's what it's like living with the Zappas. We'll take just these 2 more questions here real quick, and then...
I've been playing guitar for about 40 years, and when I started, I also sang. I loved to sing. And about 10 years into it, I woke up and I said, no more singing, because I realized I wasn't progressing as a guitarist. And so I started to just play, and my guitar playing took off. So fast forward 40 years, and I'm having the same dilemma. I have a nylon string classical. I play a contemporary classical guitar. That's the style. But I also have a nylon electric guitar with a MIDI. I have a Roland GR20. I have a Line 6 M9, etc. So I do this stuff. But I always go back to the classical for 2 reasons. One is the purity of sound. And it's a stylistic preference, I understand that. But also, I still progress as a guitarist when it's just me and the unamplified guitar. And I'm wondering in your development if that resonates with you.
As I just said to you a few minutes ago, when I got back from playing the electric guitar with the orchestra, the first thing I did was pick up my acoustic guitar.
Yeah, okay.
And just to do something new, I retuned it a bit and started playing some more. I've always recommended to everyone that you combine those 2 things. Just as you combine analog and digital. You combine drum machines with real drums. You combine acoustic guitar with electric guitar. I think it's very, very healthy for you and very unhealthy just to stay rooted in just one of them, because technology, as great as it is, it's an easy thing to lose yourself in. And the idea is for you to use it as a tool. It's your tools. It's your paint box. Don't let it take over you to where you're just sitting there turning knobs all day. That's not the idea at all. So in order to keep myself from losing track of that, I go back to play acoustic piano sometimes, or acoustic guitar, real drums. I like to play anything I can get my hands on. A lot of things are unamplified acoustic instruments, pure sound, as you said.
All right.
I think it's very good, but you shouldn't have stopped singing. That's the purest sound of all.
Yeah, well, that's, my mother tells me that.
Well, I hardly know where to start of topics I would like to hear you talk about, but trying to keep it relevant to the guitar sound thing, with the Parker, I know you kind of made the transition to playing the Parker several years ago now, but, obviously the versatility is something that's very attractive, that you can, you could get a number of different sounds where you don't have to switch as many guitars and things like that. But I was just wondering how you feel about the sort of subtle tonal differences that obviously you could emulate your old Strat sounds or some of the other guitars you use, but of course it's not exactly the same. I figured it's relevant to the topic today and could also give you a transition to.
Well, it's true that it's the same problem you may have with modeling. You can get only so close, but frankly, you really don't get exactly the same. I mean, you just won't. A Parker Fly has a Parker Fly sound. A Stratocaster has a Stratocaster sound, for example. And even though I've got the Variax in here and I can sound like a Stratocaster, it's not totally there. It's not, I'll admit it, But I think the difference is slight enough that, especially for live performance, it really doesn't matter. So for studio performance, for records, when you want to put something down on a record and it's going to be there forever and ever, use the real thing. That's what I do. But I've grown so accustomed to the Parker Fly, not for those reasons, not for the versatility or even the sound, although the sound is excellent. It's the way it plays. The neck on this guitar is extremely thin and very fluid. And from the first time I ever picked it up, I played better. So what do you do when you find an instrument that makes you play better? You play it, And secondly, we were talking about tuning problems. This guitar is the first and only guitar that I know of that I've ever played. I can do anything I want, and it doesn't go out of tune. And I put new strings on it every show, and in 5 minutes' time, it stays perfectly in tune. That's just some of the things I like about it. So that's why I changed this guitar, and I'm really, really pleased with it. But I still like all the other guitars that I still have. I have Stratocaster and a Rickenbacker 12-string and an old Gretsch vintage guitar, And each one of them, they're like people. They all have their own characteristics, their own sound, their own feel about them. But really, for me, to play the best that I can play in front of you guys wherever I go in the world, this is the best guitar for me. Because the tremolo works so beautifully, it stays perfectly in tune. It's also a nice thing that it weighs 4 pounds. So my chiropractor doesn't think so, but I do. So since we're on that subject, can I tell you a little bit about this guitar, the Parker guitar, before we take some more questions or whatever? Ken Parker, in fact, called me just the other day out of the blue. I hadn't talked to him for years. The man's a genius, luthier. He figured out, for 20 years he took to do this, how to shape the guitar for the perfect resonating piece of wood. That's why the headstock is shaped this way. It resonates perfectly that way. And he made it, and it's such a thin little guitar, it's so light as a feather, that's why they call it the Fly, that actually if you put strings on it, the way it, as just a piece of wood, the neck would not be able to withstand the pressure. So what did he do? He decided, he's a scientist kind of guy. He said, what we'll do is we take this thin coat of carbon epoxy, when we have the guitar as a bare piece of wood, we paint this thin coat on it, we put it in an oven, and we bake it into the wood. And when you bake it into the wood, it makes the tensile strength of the wood 10,000 times stronger. 10,000 times stronger. You can stand on the neck of this guitar. I do it in my kitchen all the time. And it won't change anything. So most guitars, the neck changes with weather, it changes with sweat, it changes with all kinds of things. It moves. And this guitar does not. It stays perfectly in tune. So every note is perfect. There's no buzzing, there's no flat notes, there's no dead spots on the guitar. There's no need ever to intonate the guitar. These are all problems I'm telling you that guitars had before this. So as much as I love Gibsons and Rickenbackers and Fenders, all of those guitars had these inherent problems. They don't stay in tune perfectly. Sometimes you need to replace the frets. You need to intonate the guitar. A Les Paul weighs 13 pounds. Now, as much as I love those guitars, this has none of those inherent problems at all. And the tremolo system is fabulous, and it has an acoustic pickup built in here. And for me, it's a MIDI guitar. That was the one thing they didn't do that I changed about it that made this my own model. This is the Adrian Belew model, signature Parker Fly, because I added these new electronics. That's all that's different. The actual guitar is just the same as Ken Parker invented it. And they're made right here in Chicago, by golly. So there's a little history lesson in guitar there. For 50 years, you had just Fender and just Gibson, and everything was kind of a takeoff of that, but all of them had similar problems, you know. And finally, this guy comes along and invents something that has no problems. I want to show you something else. Now, this is really interesting. I brought this for a friend of mine who's, if you know, there's such a thing as fretless guitar, where they have no frets at all. So the notes slide much like a slide guitarist or even a violinist. And I had Parker make me one. There's a fretless Parker right there. Isn't that nice looking? I haven't even started playing on it. I'm afraid what might happen. The problem with fretless guitars is the notes die off really quickly. That's the main reason a lot of people don't use them that often. I put fretless guitar on the very first song on my very first solo record, the song was called Big Electric Cat. That's a fretless guitar. But that was always a problem, that the notes died. So one of the things we did, this is another new bit of technology, it's been around about a dozen years, it's not all that new, is something called a sustainer. This pickup here is a normal guitar pickup, but if I pull this knob, it becomes a sustainer. I'll show you the difference. That's how long the note would last without the sustainer. Now I'll pull the sustainer on. So my point being that with the fretless guitar and a sustainer, now you can really, start playing some. I can't wait to do it. I think it's going to, be like having a big violin.
So do you want to do one piece to close? It's a couple minutes after 6. And
That fast, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's
I had so much more to tell you. Well, okay. I'm going to play another brand new piece that I don't even have a name for it quite yet. Let me find it in here. This, by the way, is a MIDI controller. So I write my sounds as a program. Each program's given a name, and then I can go and pick that program out by picking the right, by picking the right number on this thing, on the MIDI board here. These are volume pedals for the different things I can bring in. This is, of course, my secret pedal that makes me sound fast. And this is the Jimi Hendrix pedal that I no longer use. So there you go. All right. Oh, wait. I messed it up again. Oh.
Yeah, you got to tell them about the
I'm so
stool.
glad you mentioned the stool. Yes, the stool. Woo. I love the stool. This is called the Swooper. I believe it was made in Switzerland or Germany. A man and wife team who were, I don't know, she was a plumber and he was an ergonometrist or something. I'm not sure what happened, but they decided to build something that's better for your back. If you sit down on this stool and then you lean forward, unfortunately it makes you look like you have a bigger belly than you do, but it pulls in your back muscles. So for people who sit 8 hours a day, like I do sometimes, it's really great. And of course it bounces around and you can, it's, how was it explained to me that you're not supposed to sit for a long time in a static chair. You need a chair that moves. And it's interesting, the man who has this Swooper called me the other day and asked me if I would like to be a dealer of Swoopers. He saw my show in San Francisco, and he said, I've never seen anyone use the Swooper. Now I see you use it, and maybe you'd like to sell them on your website or something. I said, absolutely. They're very expensive, but I'll give you $50 off. We're working it out, folks. I don't know, but there might be a future for you Swooper users at my website.